The CH-46 Sea Knights lifted off from the deck of the USS Nassau, their twin rotors beating against the freezing North Atlantic air. Inside the cabins, Marines sat packed together, gripping their rifles, their faces set with determination. Ahead of them lay Keflavik Airfield, a critical Soviet-held strongpoint in Iceland. Flying in formation alongside them, AH-1W Cobra gunships scanned the shoreline, their anti-tank ordnance loaded and ready. The flight pushed inland, hugging the coastline. In the distance, the glow of runway lights and vehicle headlights signaled their target. The Soviets were dug in. SA-13 SAM launchers sat concealed in revetments near the airfield perimeter, waiting for the first sign of an air assault. The moment the helicopters came into range, the first missiles streaked upward, leaving behind a trail of fire. One of the lead Sea Knights took a direct hit. The explosion ripped through its fuselage, sending it spinning into the ground below, killing all Marines on board. Another missile launched, this time aimed at the trailing helicopter. The pilot dropped countermeasures and banked hard, but was also hit by the SAM. The remaining Sea Knights pushed forward. In less than 20 minutes, the airfield was secure. The control tower had been cleared, Soviet aircraft sat abandoned, and the next Marine infantry squadron was already inbound from the Saipan with follow-on forces. The Marines had taken Keflavik. The war in Iceland was far from over, but NATO had just landed its first decisive blow. The Soviet convoy cut through the rough North Atlantic, gray hulls rising and falling with the freezing waves. A dozen ships, a mix of transports, landing ships, and escorts, plowed toward Iceland, their decks stacked with APCs, tanks, and troops. Reinforcements for the Soviet garrison at Keflavik. They thought they were moving undetected. They were wrong. High above, two P-3C Orion patrol aircraft flew in staggered formation. Their sensor operators locked onto the convoy. Their radars painted the entire group, every ship, every course correction. Their crews watched, listened, and relayed everything back to Keflavik.
Poseidon 1 to Keflavik, convoy sighted. 12 ships, at least 4 escorts. Moving at 15 knots, bearing 085. Over.
In the cold depths below, the USS Louisville, a Los Angeles-class attack submarine, silently shadowed the formation. Running quiet as a grave, she crept beneath the waves, her sonar operators tracking the convoy's every move. A Cresta-class missile cruiser swept the water with active sonar pings, hunting for submarines. But the Louisville stayed just outside detection range.
Keflavik, Poseidon 1. Louisville is in position. She's got a clean shot.
A moment of silence. Then the order came.
Louisville, you are cleared to engage.
The submarine's torpedo room came to life. Tube 1, fire. With a muffled roar, a Mark 48 ADC-AP torpedo launched from the Louisville's forward tube, slicing through the dark waters. It locked onto its target, the Cresta-class missile cruiser, and accelerated. Up above, the Orion's crew watched on their screens, tracking the torpedo's movement. The The Cresta's sonar operator must have detected it at the last second. The destroyer veered hard, engines roaring as it tried to evade. Too late. The Mark 48 slammed into back of the Cresta. A deep, hollow explosion cracked through the ocean as the Soviet warship split apart, a column of fire and metal rising from its center. Within minutes, the Cresta was sinking, its bow rising high before plunging into the deep. The convoy was now exposed. On board the surviving Soviet ships, alarms blared. Crews rushed to their battle stations, scanning the water for the unseen threat. Their formation tightened, the remaining escorts shifting position to protect the vulnerable transports. But the damage was done. They knew they were being hunted. The Americans weren't finished yet. From above, the P-3C Orions kept watch. In the depths below, the Louisville reloaded. And back at Keflavik, B-52 crews were being briefed on the convoy's location and projected destination. The airfield was quiet now, except for the distant hum of idling Abrams engines and the crackling of small fires from wrecked Soviet vehicles. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. Keflavik was about to become one of the most important NATO air bases in the North Atlantic. From the west, 5 B-52 Stratofortresses appeared over the coastline, their wings wide, their fuselages stripped of payload. They carried no bombs today, just fuel, spare parts, and ground crews. For days, these bombers had been flying from the U.S., refueling over the Atlantic to get to their new home.
Keflavik Tower, this is Titan Flight. 5 B-52s inbound for landing. Request clearance. Titan Flight, Keflavik Tower. You are cleared for landing. Welcome to Iceland.
One by one, the massive bombers lined up for approach, their flaps extending, landing gear deploying. The first B-52 touched down, its tires screeching against the frozen runway before it slowed to a crawl. The others followed, rolling into their designated parking areas. Ground crews rushed forward, waving them in. Keflavik was no longer just a captured airfield. It was a fortress, a NATO stronghold that would soon become the center of the air war over the North Atlantic. The bombers were here, the base was operational, and soon the war would be coming to the Soviets. The runway at Keflavik trembled as the first B-52 Stratofortress throttled up, its 8 engines roaring against the frozen air. One by one, the bombers lifted off, their massive wings heavy with AGM-86E air-launched cruise missiles, each programmed for a single purpose: sink the Soviet convoy. 50,000 feet, a RA-5C Vigilante reconnaissance aircraft streaked through the sky, just beyond the range of Soviet air defenses. Its powerful cameras and sensors painted a perfect picture of the convoy. 7 transports, 3 escorts, steaming southeast. The pilot and recon officer in the rear seat fed real-time targeting data back to Keflavik.
Viking Eye to Titan. Targets are holding steady on heading 110. Speed 15 knots. No air cover detected. You are weapons free.
At 37,000 feet, the 5 bombers formed up, pushing east over the North Atlantic. Two F-15 Eagles climbed to meet them, their afterburners glowing against the sky. Their job was simple: keep the bombers safe.
Titan flight, this is Eagle Lead. We've got you covered. Copy, Eagle Lead. We're pushing to launch point.
200 miles from target far out to sea, the Soviet convoy was still reeling. One ship was already lost, torpedoed by the USS Louisville. The survivors had tightened their formation, their escorts scanning for more threats, their anti-air defenses on full alert. It wouldn't matter. From high above, the B-52s reached their launch zone. All Titan aircraft, weapons free, fire at will. The bomb bay doors opened, and the first AGM-86E cruise missile dropped into the slipstream, its rocket booster igniting. The second followed, then the third. Soon, a total of 40 missiles streamed toward the convoy, skimming just above the waves at Mach 0.73. The remaining escorts fired back, launching surface-to-air missiles blindly into the air. It didn't matter. The AGMs were too fast, too low. The first ship never saw it coming. A cruise missile punched through its deck and detonated below the waterline, sending a fireball erupting from the hull. The second transport tried to maneuver. Too late. A missile slammed into its bridge, turning it into twisted steel and burning wreckage. Mission complete. The B-52s banked west, turning for home. Not a single bomber had been touched.
Mission successful. 4 ships confirmed sunk. Remaining enemy forces are retreating. Roger, Titan. Nice shooting.
The battle for the North Atlantic wasn't over, but today it was a victory, and the Soviets knew it.